Despite popular belief making people think otherwise, I don't actually hate everything. In fact, there's plenty I love. Amongst those things, however, Sakurataisen is not a series I would have even considered the possibility of me liking were you to describe it to me. It's a combination of a lot of Japanese game tropes that I hate, most of all being that it's, well, anime as fuck. Despite that, I found myself totally enamored by it. The world, characters and gameplay not only won me over, but had me so invested that I decided to go through the entire franchise, including all of the untranslated side material. There's a reason why my biggest project to date is a retrospective of every single game and anime in the series, and while it's not my best video, it's definitely the one that I put the most heart into, and so I believe it still holds up fairly well. Well, I say every game and anime, but that's not entirely true. There were 4 things that I neglected to talk about in that original video, being the manga, the stage plays, the novels, and the drama CDs. Truth be told, I had done this primarily because the video was already like close to an hour, and I really didn't want to make it any longer than it needed to be. But whatever the case, today I'd like to rectify that mistake. Once again, I will not be discussing the PS4 game or any of its side material, however I do have some things to say about it toward the end of the video. So if you haven't seen the first video, I highly recommend that you do so, just so you can get up to speed on my thoughts about the series in general. You know what? This thing's actually really cool. I went in expecting little more than an adaptation of the original game, but I actually ended up getting something much better. The manga is split into 2 parts, both of 9 volumes in length. The first part focuses on the events of the game's first 6 chapters, and the second on the rest of the story. And while it is an adaptation of the original game, it does a lot to differentiate itself from said game, and most of it for the better, I'm not going to lie. They bring in a lot of concepts and characters from the second game too, in ways that feel neither shoehorned in or unjustified, such as Kayama. And before I continue, I first have to apologize for something. In the last video I accidentally mixed up Kayama's name with Kamiyama's, and I didn't notice it until way after uploading it, even though I wrote it right in the script. So anyway, he's here now, serving the same role he did in the games as the leader of the Imperial Moon Division, for Recon. Something I really like about this is that they dedicate most of the very first chapter to fleshing out his relationship with Ogami. In the games it often felt like Ogami was either embarrassed or annoyed because of him, and while it leads to some hilarious interactions, it lacked a basis to actually convince you that these two are supposed to be really good friends. The manga remedies this by just showing us a bit of their time at the Navy, with Kayama's bombastic attitude and hot-headedness contrasting wonderfully with the more reserved and calculated Ogami. This actually leads me to the best thing about this version of the story, Ichiro himself. In the original game he served his role well, but was never really that much of a character, and he was never developed like the rest of the cast either. The second game fully fleshed him out, and this manga is a great way of seeing the post-2 version of the character reintroduced into the events of the first game. His expressions and reactions to things around him are far more exaggerated and energetic than in the actual game, like you'd see in a lot of the later ones, and it really helps bring the character to life. Furthermore, they recontextualized a lot of the scenes and expanded on them in ways that I greatly appreciated. A great example is how they handled Yoneda messing with Ogami in the first episode. While in the game he is irritated by it, he takes his fate as a ticket clipper in stride for the most part. In the manga, on the other hand, he tries to do it, but snaps under the idea that he, a soldier trained specifically to protect his country, is now forced to slave away in a theater, going as far as to ask himself why he's even there to begin with. This culminates in him finding comfort in the fact that by helping the theater, he's indirectly helping the people of the big city by giving them a place of respite from their daily life, after seeing one of the performances for himself. This is then subverted again by having him encounter and fight Akuma face on, essentially unarmed, pushing him so far as to hand in a letter of resignation, as he feels the need to defend his country on the front lines no matter what, which then prompts Yoneda to mock him for not being able to see through the charade. It allows for a very different side of the character to be shown off, and does it in an incredibly refined manner. What helps is that this is a treatment that every single character receives, but as stated earlier, Ogami benefits from it the most. One episode from the game that I think really benefits from these changes as well is episode 5, or as I like to call it, the 3 Idiots in a Haunted Mansion chapter, which just so happens to be my favorite. Small changes like Ogami faking an illness in an attempt to get Kana and Sumire to work together, or the addition of the Ghost Girl really helped build on top of what was already there, and I really liked it. The plot also sometimes cuts to characters currently not involved with the main plot, or takes some time away from it to focus on a short one-off comedy chapter, like one where Koran tries to invent an air conditioner. And I like that, as it really puts into perspective how little Ogami actually knows compared to so many of the other characters. I mean, he didn't even know Kayama was around until the second game, but I digress. Another thing that's really cool is that on occasion there will still be fight scenes outside of the Kobu. This is something that happened like once or twice in some of the games, but is never properly shown. So it's cool to actually see them, especially because the actual Kobu fight scenes are pretty lame. They do their job well enough but lack any real punch. There's a lot of small details all throughout, ranging from cameos to the lyrics of one of the drama CD songs showing up while the girls are hanging out in Ginza. And yes, I did make a funny face whenever I recognized something. Now, what did leave me perplexed a bit was the mysterious absence of the victory poses. It doesn't matter at all whatsoever, but it's really weird not to have them. Or maybe I'm just weird. Between every chapter you get these pretty cool full-page artworks, and every volume ends with OG Hiroi's thoughts on his experience writing the series as well as the manga, as well as a voice actor's thoughts on the character they play. All of them speak of the series and its characters with such reverence, and it's honestly a joy to see. It's also got some incredibly insightful stuff, and I honestly do recommend reading them. Arguably the best part about this manga is that it is the only version of the original game's story to be localized outside of Asia. Well, unless you're Russian, that is. In that case, you've had the entirety of the first 4 games available on PC fully translated since like 1999. It's just a shame that only ever part 1 was translated. However, I will say that was probably due to its wacky production. The first part started publication in 2003, being translated towards its end in 2007, I believe. Part 2 started in 2009 and wouldn't finish until July of 2021. That was like last year. Keep in mind that the abysmal PS4 game released in 2019. It took a total of 18 fucking years for this manga to end. That's 4 years more than the 14-year gap between So Long My Love and Shin. I don't even want to know what happened, but some shit must have gone down in Hiroi's life during the writing of part 2. But who knows. Maybe if you're lucky, part 2 will get translated, eventually. Thanks to the first part's localization, however, I was able to read the manga in 4 different ways, all with their weird unique quirks. An English fan translation, the official English translation, a French fan translation, and the official German translation. However, aside from translation quirks, I only ever noticed a single visual difference, being that the religious swastika on Rasetsu's forehead and shoulder were replaced by a cross in the German version for obvious reasons. It was a pain in the ass to scan my copy of the German volume, by the way, so you better appreciate this. The art is pretty nice and easy on the eyes, albeit a tad simple. Though I will say the simplicity lends itself very well to the exaggerated facial expressions like in the third game's FMV cutscenes. It's just a shame that, as I mentioned earlier, the fight scenes are pretty lackluster. All things considered, this is an excellent version of the story, and one that I honestly prefer to the game in some aspects. Though I would definitely not recommend it over the game by virtue of the translation just not being finished. I also believe you'll only really appreciate all the little details having played all of the games. Quite possibly my favorite aspect about this entire run though has to be the end of the 5th volume. It concludes with 2 little gag comic segments, the first one being a series of 4 coma strips based on So Long My Love called the Sakura Wars Show Theater. For context, a 4 coma is a 4-panel gag comic strip ordered from top to bottom. These ones are pretty fun, I guess, arguably funnier than any of the jokes in the New York anime. The full multi-page gag comic, though, is the fun part, full of references to the entire franchise, even going for deep cuts, like the drastic difference between Iris in the original game and her in the TV anime. This is also the only time any member of the Paris Kagekidan other than Erika is ever seen in the entirety of part 1. It's fun and dumb, and I like it. And that wonderfully segues us into the next thing I want to talk about, the sakurataisen Show Theater. Same name as those 4 coma from earlier. Makes sense, since it's essentially the exact same thing, but stretched out to 4 volumes. It was really fucking annoying to track these things down, and in the end all I could find was a couple of pages from the first one, in really shitty quality at that, as well as some incredibly shady Amazon listings. 1 yen? 30 yen? Do you know how little money that is? That's like, I can't even begin to describe how little money that is. It's like 20 cents. I could probably pay for this with the scraps I find under the sofa of my friend's house. There is no way this is real. I am not risking 20 billion euros or whatever in shipping fees, so please just bear with the scans I have here. In any case, yeah, these are just fine, I guess. I really hate the art style, I'm not going to lie. The punchlines are, whatever, not nearly as witty as the ones in the 2003 manga. I've already ran out of things to say, so I may as well move on. Since we're still on the subject of literature though, may as well get the novels out of the way now, of which there are 7. 3 of them are simple adaptations, one being based on the original game, one on the Guka Kenran OVA, and one on the movie. They're alright as far as I can tell. The rest is where it gets interesting though. Sakura Wars Eve is a prologue to the original game that chronicles what the cast did before joining the Imperial Flower Division. Similarly, Paris Eve is the exact same thing for the cast of the 3rd game. These seem incredibly fascinating and I really wish I could read them properly, but tracking them down seems to be near impossible, meaning we're essentially stuck with a bunch of plot synopses. The same goes for some of the other novels too, unfortunately. Taishou Love Song is Frime, from what I've seen, so you can check it out if you manage to find it somewhere. And then there's Taishou Roman Kaidou Shinshou. No admit for this one, as it was a web novel written for Red's website back in 2001 before it got nuked in 2008. But thankfully you can still read it, thanks to the Wayback Machine archive, which I'll be linking in the description. And yeah, it's a trip. It's got a lot of very interesting concepts in it if nothing else. I'll give it that. I just want to preface this by saying that yes, Kanadegumi did in fact have an anime, as well as a stage play and a drama CD. But almost all of them are based on the manga, and the two that aren't, I for the life of me could not track down. So I will be exclusively focusing on the manga, which was written specifically for a female audience. The plot is completely disconnected from any of the games, with only very few pre-established characters making an appearance, those being Kazumi, Tsubaki, Yuri, and for a single chapter, Yoneda. Everyone else is either nothing more than a silhouette, or in Ogami's case, has their face completely hidden. I like this as it, in theory, allows the manga to be its own thing rather than being chained down by the need to keep long-established characters as close to the source material as possible. Said manga follows the exploits of Neko Miyabi, who was touched by some black dude as a child, and because of that she has the ability to see sounds, or as I like to call it, chromesthesia. This ability is why she is sent to Taishou to become the captain and maestro of the Kanadegumi, the Imperial Theater's entirely male orchestra division, that also specializes in minimizing casualties and damage to civilian areas. I really like this setup for two reasons. For one, it expands on the many assault troop divisions from the games, like Kayama's Recon Moon division, which all serve to back up the main squad. But it also serves as a look at the big side of theater that the games don't show us. The events behind the stage. It takes an incredible amount of work and manpower to bring a performance to life, and the people behind the scenes doing the work for the lighting, music, set design and so on are just as vital as the actors on stage, and so I greatly appreciate Kanadegumi for exploring that side of theater. Every now and then there's a few for Koma, which are alright, and on occasion there are longer panels on the side of a page which give you more details about the characters, which is nice. At just 4 volumes and 24 chapters, it's also relatively short, so there are definitely worse stories set in the same universe in this one, especially as it also serves as a pretty interesting inverse to the original game's plot. However, I do have a few gripes with it. For one, a lot of the main characters feel like retreads of the exact same archetypes we've already seen in the games. A good example is Hugo, who may as well be a male version of Maria, nothing else for the first half of the story. It's kind of a shame, and I wish they had taken the opportunity to make much more interesting characters, the likes of which we haven't seen before. Furthermore, a lot of the comedy just falls flat on its ass, which is kind of a bad thing when most of the story revolves around character interactions. The art is pretty nice most of the time, and while I do like Neko's design, the rest of the original cast is pretty damn generic, to the point where I immediately thought of other characters from other media when I saw them. And the second I made those connections in my head, I could no longer take them seriously. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad thing, however, I simply have a hard time believing that these designs belong in the same world as Fujishima's. It's very distinctly the style of a different artist. I know this is a nitpick, but it definitely stuck out to me. However, definitely not Luther did punch Neko really hard that one time, so you know what, all is forgiven. I clapped. All around, I thought the manga was fine. Was it worth the hassle I went through to find readable scans of it? Fuck no. But I'm also not the target audience, so who knows how they'd find it. I have a feeling I'd probably like Kanadegumi better if I was a woman. When it comes to the drama CDs and the stage plays, there are simply far too many to talk about all of them individually, so for that reason I'll be talking about the plays in a more generalized manner and skimming over the CDs. The CDs are fine. As always, the voice actors do a fantastic job, but the biggest highlights are consistently the songs. I'm really not a big music guy, which is to say I basically don't listen to music, ever, but the songs here are generally really nice to listen to, and I don't mind listening to them casually as well. That's really all I have to say about them. The stage plays, on the other hand, I have plenty to say about. I don't think I've ever been this fascinated by a theater performance. You see, every single voice actor in the series was chosen not because of their experience in the business or their talent at voice acting, but for their experience of singing and dancing on stage. It goes a long way in making the performances sound believable, and the characters are so closely tied to their actors that I simply cannot imagine them being voiced by anyone else. For this reason, at every single live performance and stage play, all of the same voice actors played their own characters, and it shows. The way that they bring the characters to life is incredible, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for everyone. Often it also feels like even the people behind the scenes are having a great time. Just look at how happy Tanaka looks here. I found myself legitimately invested in every single one I watched, and I won't lie, I did hum along to the occasional song here and there. It was just really fun seeing all of these characters in such a genuine manner. A lot of the humor also did manage to get a good chuckle out of me. The lighting was excellent, the set design serviceable, and the costumes, while off-looking at times, immediately recognizable. But most of all, the choreography was fantastic. I know it's easy to take for granted, but the amount of work that goes into every single move, having every motion sync up perfectly with like 10 other people, is genuinely incredible, and I cannot commend them enough for pulling it off so perfectly for like 20 years straight. I actually used to work at a moderately sized theater myself, and subsequently, I know firsthand how difficult some things can be. It's a large part of why the aspects of the series regarding theater appeal to me as much as they do. Call me biased, and you know what, I may as well be, but I believe theater to still very much hold a valuable place even in modern times. There's a lot of things that the audience doesn't realize. The fun thing about stage is that every mistake has to be worked around. You can't just try again. Because of this improvisation, it often becomes almost impossible to discern whether a moment was intentional or not. And I love this, as it means that pretty much the entire time the actors are injecting their performances with a lot of themselves, if that makes sense to you. This is obviously just one of the many aspects that make these plays work. The technical aspects are absolutely not to be scoffed at either. And you know what? Maybe you don't care about the intricacies of acting or technical stuff and just want a good live performance set in the same world as Sakura Wars. Not only is that totally fine, but you'll probably end up still enjoying yourself there, as they are all pretty damn fun to watch. The performances are phenomenal and the vocal performances are fantastic all across the board. I mean hell, I never would have guessed that Kaede and Ogami would make for such an awesome duet, but here we are. Also shoutouts to that one Sega Sanshiro shot at during the Taito play in 2010. But before I move on, there is one thing I have to mention. The motherfucking Dandy Gang. In particular, Dan Dandy Kōsuke, aka the Dandy Boss himself. This guy is unironically one of my favorite characters solely for how bizarre his existence is. Originally he was created specifically for the stage plays with the sole purpose of balancing out the ratio of male to female characters in them, but then he ended up becoming so popular that he not only made an appearance in Guka Kenran, but the manga as well. And honestly, after watching all of these stage plays, I can definitely see why he ended up being so beloved. Hell, he even became one of my favorite characters. His bombastic attitude, contrasted by his position as a vicious gang leader, lends itself really well to comedy, and he's just a blast to watch. Honestly, everyone is. And man, those songs are just super nice to listen to. I'm probably gonna be pulling some of them onto my phone to listen to whenever I feel like, as silly as that sounds. I know I'm repeating myself here, but these stage plays are fantastic, and I highly recommend checking them out. I've actually compiled a playlist with a lot of what I could find on YouTube, and I'll be linking them in the description. It's definitely not complete, but I intend to update it over time. Alright then, 20 minutes in, and I think that covers all I wanted to talk about in this little part 2. Definitely didn't end up as short and easy as I had imagined and would have liked, but hey, it is what it is. But this is definitely not the last time I'll be talking about Sakura Wars on this channel. There's enough to make at least 2 more videos on, and it's definitely something that I'll end up doing eventually. For one, there's an abundance of crossovers and weird spin-offs that aren't even really games, which is why I didn't originally talk about them to begin with. I'd love to discuss those, but on the other hand, there's the big elephant in the room. Sakurataisen, aka Sakura Wars PS4. Look, I legitimately hate this game, but at this point it just doesn't feel right not to talk about it, and more importantly about why. So eventually, I'd like to make a video on it and every single one of its side materials, as well as Sakura Revolution, which I did actually play back when it, still existed. There is a lot of material here, no matter how much I pretend it doesn't exist. But all of that is for some other time, maybe in a year. The thing is, I don't want to back myself into a corner and start making content about just one thing. To me, these videos are a way of telling you, the audience, about things that I either find really fascinating or like, for one reason or another. And so the last thing I want is to pump out the same thing again and again. So after the next video, expect something wackier and more out there again. Or don't, up to you really. Whatever the case, I hope you enjoyed this video, as different as a subject it may be. Cheers. And do me a favor here, have a fantastic morning, day, evening, or night.